The Oklahoma Sooners will take on the LSU Tigers in the final game of the season, a road trip to Baton Rouge, probably at night. Dude, scary hours. We'll discuss coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Oklahoma Sooners, the LSU Tigers, the final game of the 2024 regular season. How much will it have an impact on Oklahoma's postseason? What do you make of the LSU Tigers, Jay, as you take a look at them from afar?
They've got a lot of questions, right? Like schedule-wise, it looks like it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. I mean, they open up with USC. I think that game tells us basically everything about how this season is going to go for them. But they've lost 5 straight first opening games in the season, right? So they're 0-1 in 5 straight seasons. But this is the fascinating thing about this, right? They lost that last few years, but these last couple of years, they still finished the year with 10 wins. And so Brian Kelly always figures out how to right the ship. They've added new staff members, especially on defense, because last year's defense, PU.
Cheeks,
PU, stinky, awful. But they brought in, like I said, some talent when it comes to staffers, right? They snatched up Bo Davis from Texas, right? They got Corey Raymond to come back, who was part of technically all the DBU era, right? When they actually had really good defensive backs. Bringing in Baker from Missouri at the defensive coordinator, which is why I'm not as afraid of Missouri, because they're still figuring out what their defense is going to look like. LSU has a chance to really be a challenge, and I think that they'll be a challenge for us because it's the last game of the season. At that point, Nussmeier had something figured out.
Yeah, and you look at what they lost on defense, or what they're having to build up from the defensive side of the ball, because that defense wasn't good. There's a reason Jaden Daniels had to go Super Saiyan and carry the weight of Baton Rouge on his shoulders last season. It's because the defense was not good. They've made some really strong additions, but how quickly will they be able to turn that over and right the ship? That's the question I think everybody's looking at. We'll find out pretty early on against USC when they take on Miller Moss and Zachariah Branch and that talented offense that USC will put on the field. By the time we get to LSU, they'll probably be looking a lot better than what they do early in the season.
Mm-hmm.
But the big question I have is on the offensive side of the ball, because it's hard to go from Jaden Daniels to Garrett Nussmeier and not think that you're losing something. I mean, Nussmeier is not going to be the same athlete, not going to be the same runner as Jaden Daniels was. Even if he throws it well, you're still losing a lot of the rushing production that Jaden Daniels put on the field. You also lost 2 wide receivers to the first round. I mean, Malik Neighbors is out there making plays in training camp right now, irritating and instigating a lot of people in training camp practices. It's hard to lose that kind of mentality. Now, LSU, they recruit well. They recruit very, very well, especially at wide receiver, along with defensive back. So I'd no doubt believe that they've got some dudes that are going to be really, really good. But are they going to be as good as what he was last year? Are they going to be as good as those 2 first-round wide receivers that they lost? The offensive line lost some dudes to the portal. Like, this is a team that had a lot of turnover, but it's still going to be a talented team.
Yeah, they should have one of the best offensive lines in the SEC. I mean, they got their 2 bookend guys are most likely getting drafted within the first 3 rounds. So we're not even going to deny that. But you make some good points here. Their skills position guys, running backs, wide receiver, young, right? Caleb Jackson's a sophomore. We'll see what he looks like. Will he be good? Will he be not? We don't know. But you don't have a Jaden Daniels being able to be the dual threat and do everything. They're going to have to be more balanced because Nussmeier is not at all the talent that Jaden Daniels was. He's going to have to get out there. He can move, but he ain't moving like Jaden Daniels. He can throw, but he ain't throwing like Jaden Daniels. So by the time we see them, we'll have a better understanding. But yes, that team is young. I mean, Kyron Lacey's probably is the only senior out there really at wide receiver that we will have to think about. And so that means that wide receiver unit is a bunch of young guys that still going to have to prove themselves. I like our odds against them. Now, Harold Perkins might be a problem if he's used
will
right.
Be a problem.
Okay, correction. He will be a problem, But that's if he's used right? Last year, he wasn't a factor because he was used wrong. His freshman year, absurdly talented. But he was used right at that point, right? So the question is, will they put him in the positions to be successful that can help him end up, because he's going to get drafted, but can they put him in positions to be successful? I don't know. Now, I think Baker's a heck of a lot better defensive coordinator than what they had before. So I think that at some point they'll have it figured out. That's what's going to make it interesting, is what they look like later in the season. Because when they play us, it'll be post Vanderbilt, which I don't even know if that's considered a real game. But they'll have a stretch of Texas A&M bye week, Bama, Florida, Vanderbilt. I think that Bama game, which will be coming off of a bye week, which is of course of interest, that game's going to tell us a lot about what LSU really is going to be when they see Alabama. So by November 9th, we'll be able to look at that game and be like, okay, this is probably what we're going to see for the rest of the season.
Yeah, because who that team is now isn't necessarily going to be the same team that we see when they face Alabama, and definitely when we face them at the end of the season. But Oklahoma's not going to be the same team. This is going to be a team that's going to be very battle-tested. By the time that they have to make that trip down to Baton Rouge, you will have gone to Auburn. You will have gone to the Red River Showdown in the Cotton Bowl. You will have played in Oxford. You will have gone to Columbia. Now, as much as Columbia is not one of the great college football venues in college football, that's going to be a good Missouri team. And so you will have played Alabama the week before. So you will be a battle-tested team that's seen it all. You've seen the top and some of the best in college football by the time you have to play LSU. So you're going to be the best versions of yourself at that point. And a lot of it's going to come down to how well you handle the trip, how well you handle playing inside Tiger Stadium down there in Baton Rouge. And if you can withstand the environment and the atmosphere, the night game stuff that creates some weirdness in every matchup, no matter how good or bad LSU is, that's a lot of that. A lot of the extracurricular stuff is going to be a big part of the storyline in that game, because no disrespect to Auburn, which I know Auburn fans will take it as disrespect. No disrespect to Columbia or Oxford, but there's not an environment in college football quite like Tiger Stadium at night. There's just not.
Death Valley is a different breed. And that's all we've heard about, is how much of a different breed they are. It's a different breed. And so different. For us, we just got to be able to. The good thing for us is that by the time we get to Death Valley, we've seen Oxford, which is 70, 80,000 fans. You'll see Auburn, which is 80,000+ fans. Columbia, man, 60. But you'll see all those teams, and you'll be able to be like, all right, so this is how we need to handle playing in these road games. So I think at that point, we'll be battle tested enough to be prepared. Because there's two things that travel: run games and defenses. And the way things sound, Javonte Barnes looks like he's back to his old self. And we know Gavin Sawchuk's healthy. You have those two running backs, two-headed monster back, like we had against Florida State. Yeah, we're going to be good. And with this defense as highly rated as it's going to be, yeah, as long as those two show up, we're good.
Yep. Just got to have things clicking. And by that point in the season, you will have a good understanding of what your team is, and you'll have had enough peaks and valleys to know what you got to do better. But still, I'm looking forward to that one the most, because I think it's just going to be a tremendous atmosphere.
Agreed.
Like, for those that are going to be making the trip, I think they're going to have a blast. For those that are going to be watching on the television, I know Jay's going to be making that trip to Baton Rouge.
I'm making that one. Yeah, I will be there.
Yeah, he's excited for that one for sure. But for those that will be watching on television, man, I think it's just going to provide some great visuals on the screen as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun when we get to that time of the year. But it's gonna potentially be a game with playoff implications. So we cannot wait for that. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in, being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button again wherever you get your podcasts. Follow Jay at Unfair Sports, myself at John 9 Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners on all of the social medias. Also, big announcement, we will be bringing back the Monday Night Live show, 9 p.m. Central Time every Monday night, throughout the college football season. It'll be Jay's first live show here as a part of Locked On Sooners. We cannot wait to talk college football. It'll be during game week. We got Temple 8 days away. 8 days to the 2024 college football season starts, and we cannot wait to discuss it all with you here on Locked On Sooners. So thanks again, and make Locked On College Football your second listen of the day, where Spencer McLaughlin is going to take you through all of the storylines, the transfer portal news, conference realignment, and more over at the Locked On College Football podcast. It's in the description. You don't got to search for it. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For Jay Smith, I'm John Williams. We'll catch you next time. Boomer.
Sooner.